Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. I'm Prem, Senior Marketing Specialist here at CareerSpark. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. And we're going to talk about something really important, how phishing attack happens quietly and cause big problems without anyone noticing at first. We'll show you real examples, explain how it happens, and most importantly, how to stop it before it starts. You'll hear from security experts, see real examples, and leave with practical tips you can use right away. And at the end, we got a bonus offer to help you assess your organization readiness just for joining us today. All right, let's get started. I want to take a moment to introduce your host for today, CryoSpark. We are a team of Canada and US-based Microsoft 365 implementation experts, passionate about helping our clients achieve their ideal employee experience. We create and support great employee experience with Microsoft 365 Digital Workspace. Our headquarters are based in Davis, California, and Toronto, Canada. We have three main solution areas: modern work. The purpose is to make sure organization can work from anywhere on any devices exactly the way you want. On process transformation is to help your organization of any sizes to go digital at their own pace, transferring some repetitive tasks to AI. On secure cloud, making sure your security, compliance, identity, and device management are solid because the cloud should be safe as it is smart. Our focus is on leveraging Microsoft technologies, including Microsoft 365, Power Platform, and Azure for delivering this for our clients. All right, for housekeeping, feel free to add your questions in the Q&A panel or in the chat during the webinar session. Handouts and certificate will be sent out to your email today after the session. You'll also receive the recording and recap blog next week as well. All right, I'm excited to introduce our speakers for today. Colin Smith, Secure Cloud and Modern Work Practice Lead. Nuno is our Head of Enterprises, Architecture and IT. Gentlemen, the beach is yours.
Thanks, Prim. So we thought it'd be fun because it's July, people spending time with their families at the beach and they're having fun, but also people need to stay safe. So we thought we'd take this opportunity to spend a day at the beach with you and explain to you what it's like when you do have to deal with a security breach. So I'm Colin, and my colleague Nuno is here with us, and we're going to do this as a bit of a Q&A session. I'm going to and hopefully educate you a little bit about some of the dangers to your M365 environment in this modern cyber first world, and help you with some mitigation strategies as well. So before we go any further, really quickly, today's agenda. I'm going to review the last webinar because this is really a part 2. We're going to talk about the recent SharePoint breach, understand what a breach is, how do you recover from a breach, and what you can do to protect yourself. All right, so I think we're going to go with a poll first. I'll let you guys do the poll, and Prem, you let us know when everyone's done it, and then we'll move on. So,
it's active right now.
A lot of people are pretty confident. So it's changing. Okay, I'm going to continue, and you guys can keep doing that as you want, as you like. So, why are we here today? Well, we're not here just to talk about phishing, although we're at the beach and there are fish around. Phishing is one of the most common threats, and it's one of the most successful threats because we can't automate the responses to it and the detection because it's not an attack on machines, which are easily automated. It's an attack that targets humans, human emotions, and human frailties. So that's why they are the most successful, because they're the hardest to defend against. So let's talk about what some of the things are that we can do to help you to mitigate that as we go on. So as I said, this is a part 2. In our last webinar, we talked about security assessments and how to fortify your environment. Today, we're going to talk about what happens when all of your fortifications and all of your risk mitigations fail and something gets through, whether that's a ransomware or phishing attack. What does that look like for your enterprise, and what can you do to recover from it? Before we go too much further, I wanted to let you know we are a Microsoft partner, and when we told Microsoft that we were going to be doing a webinar on security breaches this week, they decided to help us out by having a zero-day vulnerability available to us and to you to make this a much more timely and meaningful event. As you may or may not be aware, there was a zero-day vulnerability that was exploited over the last week. It's known as CVE 2025-53770. And what does it affect? It affects on-premise SharePoint current versions, which are 2016, 2019, and subscription edition. And you can read about the impact. Alaskan Airlines, many federal agencies, state agencies, organizations of all sizes that had web exposed or internet exposed SharePoint servers were breached. And we've got some recommendations on how you can mitigate that if that applies to you. But 2 things to understand here. This attack targeted on-premise SharePoint. As we've seen over the last several years, more and more organizations are moving away from on-premise SharePoint to SharePoint Online, and organizations that could not afford or could not maintain their own SharePoint farms in the past have started their SharePoint journeys in the cloud to begin with. So they are not at risk to this vulnerability. Nuno, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, just when thinking about this vulnerability, there you got if somebody's checking to see if they've been attacked. There's a few IPs that you want to take a look at. So and I could post those after for you guys to have. But all the attacks are coming from a certain set of IPs, and it's really anybody's vulnerable to this. Anybody that has SharePoint 2016, 2019, and SC, which is the newest version. If you have older versions that are not supported, this is technically not an issue with it because it's related to some modern features.
Okay. All right, let's carry on. Like I said, we're going to do this as a bit of a Q&A. So Nuno works in our security team. He does a lot of security hardening, but he also is involved in forensics after a breach and helps organizations recover from a breach. So before we go any further, let's just do a level set. Nuno, what is a breach?
So the simple way of describing a breach, it's like it's when somebody gets access to a system or some data that they're not supposed to. It can happen through hacking, phishing, stolen passwords. Even sometimes it's mistakes by sending sensitive information to the wrong person. Right, so it and once somebody has a breach, it's really they're snooping around and getting data. So that's what's really is a breach.
Okay. And what types of organizations are susceptible?
Pretty much any type of organization is susceptible to it. Anywhere from financial institutions, healthcare providers, retail, government agencies, education is very common. Technology companies like us and probably some of you, even small business mom and pop shops, if they're on the internet or have access, their systems are connected to the internet, they're vulnerable to a lot of these types of breaches.
Okay, that's really interesting. You said there's a lot of information there. This is being recorded, right? Hey, Copilot, can you summarize what Nuno just said and put it in the next slide? All right. So that's what an IT breach looks like. And all kinds of different attacks, phishing, hacking, malware. All right, and let's talk a little bit more about some of the common types of breach that we talked about there. Nuno, what are the most common ways that organizations are being breached right now?
Some of the common ones I've been seeing and reading about is really like supply chain hacks. Really, so hackers getting access to third-party vendors, software, and organizations, or through them. People, what they call credential recycling, which is really kind of people accessing old stolen logins. So if you reuse your login a lot, that is very common to get through. Password attacks. So the old way of breaching was through passwords and stuff, exploiting passwords. What's starting to become very common is AI-powered targeting. So AI is acting as specific people, targeting, making phishing emails and stuff like that to help do the phishing parts of emails, and of course the standard phishing.
And we're an M365 shop. Most of the work we do both internally and for our clients is on M365 or other Microsoft Cloud platforms. Are there some types of breach that are more prevalent in Microsoft Cloud services?
Yeah, so the ones you see a lot of is you're going to be the phishing attacks. So people getting emails from people and clicking on links, and those gives access to people's data or installs stuff on their computers. Malware, which includes malware infections in those cases, and then there's also insider threats, which it's people accessing information they shouldn't in your organization.
Okay. So these are some of the most common types of breaches that you mentioned. Now, you mentioned password attacks or credential attacks. We've done a couple of presentations on different ways to mitigate that, such as going passwordless and talking about MFA. Do those help with these types of breaches?
Definitely. Anything when you try to the most common attack is related to your passwords. So the best way to secure yourself is putting tools like MFA. That will reduce your risk by probably 80% when it comes to 80 to 90% when it comes to password type attacks. And if you go down even further and start going passwordless or even zero trust, you can reduce your risk there quite a bit.
Okay, I guess if you don't have a password, they can't steal it.
Exactly.
Smart. Okay. So time for another poll.
Poll is active right now.
Okay. I'm going to continue while the poll goes on. We can talk about that later. Okay. So, summarizing a little bit and providing a little bit more detail about some of the most common ways in which organizations and individuals are attacked. What are some of those vectors? You mentioned phishing, and that's using deceptive emails. I think we're going to talk a little bit more about that when we talk about some of the forensics, right? Malware.
Yeah, malware, what's called insider access to stuff. Misconfigured systems is very common, and then people could get in through DoD attacks or other cross browser cross scripting through your browser. All those kind of types of more programmatic tricks that hackers use to get access to sites and stuff like that.
Right. And of course, we were talking about the SharePoint vulnerability, and that's exactly one of those software vulnerabilities that was a zero-day attack. And again, I can't say this enough. Microsoft has amazing defenses around their cloud infrastructure. Not saying that they're totally impervious to attack and breach, but they I've had a tour of their cyber defense headquarters, and what they do some amazing things trying to protect your data and their data. So unless you've got that kind of facility and that kind of technology at your disposal, you're likely better off in one of the large cloud providers' data centers, allowing them to provide some of that perimeter and monitoring for you. And like I said, many of our clients turn to us and have for a long time to help them get off of SharePoint on-prem and into the cloud. And if you've still got a footprint on-prem or on-prem, you might want to consider that, whether it's SharePoint or something else, as to whether it makes sense for you to keep it in your local data center or move it to the cloud.
And that's very true. And with that, you got to also think about why they cover a lot of the vulnerabilities with patching and all that kind of stuff. You as an organization still have to secure your environment in, making sure you got the right best practices and those kind of things in place to secure from that side also.
Right. All right, let's move on. So explain to us the timeline of a breach.
Yeah, so when you kind of thinking about the timeline, it goes through a bunch of phases, right? So when somebody first gets your environment first gets compromised, it could be they could get it within a few seconds to a few hours once they try. And really that process could be from phishing attacks, malware, all those kind of things. And the next step is when they dwell on, we call it dwelling time, and they're really just sitting there watching your environment, trying to understand how you use the system, what you do, and try to see what kind of data you have. They might not actually do anything with at that point, but they're trying to understand you as a user behaviors and stuff like that. I've seen them, look for when people's calendars to see when people are going to be out of the office, so they could send phishing attacks to people and stuff to try to understand and know that people won't be able to reply as fast, right? So because they're not going to be around. And then it's really about detecting those suspicious stuff. And and that varies in how long that could take. Depends on how fast it spreads. Then it's really about containment, because you want to reduce the impact. So you want to isolate the systems that have the issues, remove any malware, block access to those accounts or any other accounts. Sometimes you got to remove all the access to everybody temporarily, just to make sure you can contain everything. And that process could be, a few hours, say, to a few days, right? So depending on how big.
Yeah, and I've seen some large enterprises where that containment can take weeks or months.
Exactly. After that, you go into your notification, right? So depending on your industry, you might have some regulators that you have to deal with, depending on what information got leaked. You might have to reach out to law enforcement, those kind of things. You might have to reach out to your customers and employees and all that, and let them know, some data got leaked, depending what it is. You usually, this is usually done after you have enough information, you've gathered enough, so that you could provide them accurate information, because once you give them some information, they're going to ask for more details, right? So you got to have that ready. And then it's really about recovering your systems, patching your systems if you need to, resume operations. And depending on the impact, these things, the whole process could be from a couple days to months, right? So depending on the type of breach you're dealing with. And then you always, at the end, you want to learn how you can mitigate these types of things happening again. So you always want to do a post-incident review. So lessons learned, how do you improve your security, mitigate risk, right? While we could put everything in place, the hackers are always, trying to be a couple steps ahead of us. So our goal is always to be ahead of them and make sure we've mitigated the organization's risk.
All right, well, thank you. Let's move on. So you talked about the timeline. Let's talk a little bit more about the steps to recover, right? And how, and specifically in the ones you've dealt with recently. So in the last few months, and specifically around M365, because what we talked about in the previous slide was the generic timeline and incubation for malware and breaches. Let's talk specifically about what we've been dealing with at CreoSpark with our customers and how we've been helping them. So what are the steps you've been taking in an M365 environment specifically? How long does it take? And what happens if you can't recover it?
Yeah, so in the last couple months, there's been a big jump in phishing type breaches. I think in the last month, I probably dealt with 3 or 4 different organizations that have had breaches, and they're somewhat similar but a little bit different. Some of them were people got access to email through a password, a reused password. Another one, it was a password. Somebody got a link and they typed in a password into the system, and the hackers got the passwords that way. A different one was because the system was misconfigured and they clicked on a link and that gave them permission, set up what they call an app registration in the background, and gave them access to the person's mailbox and other ways through scripting. They all, in the end, do the same. People got access to the same type of information, which was the person's mailbox and calendars and a little bit more SharePoint. But what we had to do was actually figure out who was affected in the organization, and then find out how long they've been affected for, right? Because we want to figure out a timeline of when the person first got it into the system and when they started doing stuff, to make sure about data leaks, if there was any data leaks in scenarios, or was it just them pushing out the emails to everybody. And then once we've understood the who was compromised, how they got in, we tried to remove their access. We made sure there was no more holes. We've done that right away once we found who's compromised, and we try to break that down in those steps and understand the scope of the issue, right? So, and then we notified all our users, or gave our clients the list of the people who were affected, right? Anybody that got email sent, and let them do their communication, and because it's important for them to respond to their clients and let them know that they're dealing with the issue. And then once we did that, we made sure we went through everybody else's accounts, made sure they had no issues. We went through their mailboxes to make sure there was no mail rules that got added. Uh, any of the vulnerabilities, like the configuration setting that allowed somebody to put a script in an app registration, we turned that off. So, and the next phases we're going to do with some of these clients is going to actually do like full audit of their security environments. So Office 365 assessment, security assessment, just to make sure where are they in the baseline according to best practices. So that's our next step with some of them. Some we've already done. Others we're doing in the next step. The goal was to mitigate their current risk and deal with those problems first.
Okay. So, of those 3 or 4 that you're talking about, how long do they typically take to recover?
These ones were what's called. It took about a week by the time we went through all the logs. The smallest organization was probably a couple of days. Slightly bigger organizations was about a week, and that's partially because the size of their logs. Depending on the licenses you have at Microsoft 365, you have a different amount of logs available to you. So the lower end the licenses might only have say 7 days worth of logs. The higher end licenses will have 30 days, so you have more to go through. And then if you really want, you have other tools that you could put even longer logging. We always recommend it, but not every client does that or can afford to do that. And that's when it even takes longer, because you want to validate everything. But those tools will also give us abilities to detect, be more proactive versus reactive.
Okay, and now I have to imagine that not every breach is recoverable. Is that true?
I would say that, while we would hope we could recover from every breach, the honest answer is they're not always recoverable. Sometimes it's in terms of you have to restore the system from scratch, from a backup, right? So it's technically recoverable, but you will lose some data in those scenarios, depending on what it is. And this is talking all types of breaches, not just Office 365. And then with Office 365, Microsoft does a good job in backing stuff up, but we don't have access to those backups ourselves. You have to go through Microsoft. So we always recommend other organizations to have their own backups and try to mitigate some of that risk also, right? So, but then even while you're thinking about, are they recoverable? You might have lost some other non-tangible type stuff, or tangible stuff that are not technology or data. You lost trust of your customers, and those are probably as important as the technical side of it, right? You want to make sure your customers feel safe with their data and working with you as an organization.
Right. And I would imagine in a ransomware scenario, if you can't decrypt what they've encrypted, you don't have a backup, and you can't afford to pay the ransom, you have to consider that data lost.
Yeah, exactly. And hopefully it's on an individual's workstation versus the organization servers, right? And in Office 365, Microsoft has some things in place to help mitigate those type of ransomware type of damage that they've put in place, because ransomware got really popular as a security issue about probably 5 to 10 years ago. So it was very popular at that point. So Microsoft's put stuff in place in Office 365 to try to help mitigate some of that risk.
Okay, let's move on to the next slide. So this is the lessons learned, right? You want to walk us through some of these things? These are things you've told me that we help to educate our clients on. Not necessarily saying that you learned these from the breaches, but we wanted our clients to learn these things after we've helped them through a bad time.
Yeah. So my number one thing is communicate, right? Once you know enough information, communicate it to the appropriate people. That could be your employees, that could be your customers, the proper organizations, right? So the worst thing is getting that information getting out without your control, and then ruining your reputation, right? So you want to get in the forefront of that, right? Because your reputation is probably the most valuable thing an organization has, because people that don't trust you will not work with you, right? So you want to get in front of that, right? So, and then it's if you notice a little thing in your system, don't just say it's probably nothing and do nothing about it. Look into those minor anomalies. Look at it could be something, might be nothing, but you'll never know until you look at it. Most security breaches start with a little anomaly, and then it just gets people get a little farther into getting into your system, into the breach, and you find it a little bit too late. So if you put in the tools in place and do the work of reviewing your system's logs and audit the system on a constant basis, right? Go ahead.
Is there anything else on this slide that you want to talk about?
Yeah, so the other thing is make sure you have backup plans and you test those backups, right? So a lot of people think in the cloud you don't need to have backups because it's backed up by Microsoft or any other, all the other companies. They have backups for their purposes. If their servers go down, they can recover to that point. But it's your data, so you want to make sure your data is backed up. So always back up the data. If you're on-prem or in the cloud, make sure your stuff is backed up. That way you have control of what you can restore at and how fast. Yeah, okay. And then what's called hackers are they're very persistent people, right? They will keep attacking you and all that kind of stuff just to find a little hole. And if they find something, they will try to get further along. So, put the tools, make sure you have people on your team that are knowledgeable, or vendors that you work with, like ourselves, that will help you put the right steps in place to help you, follow best practices and keep your environment secure.
Okay. Thank you. Let's move on. So, what about cyber insurance? Is that helpful? Is that something that will protect an organization?
Yeah. So I try to tell everybody, in today's world, most of your financial losses when it comes to theft is through cyber threats. So it's important to have protect yourself against that. Cyber insurance is the company you go with, most of them will be there more as also not just to pay out, but also to be there as a partner, right? They help you investigate security breaches after you've identified one, try to find the holes, give you recommendations, and they will their job, they want to reduce the risk of paying out eventually the next time. So their goal is to make sure you're secure, right? And not to have repeat issues, right? So work get insurance and work with them when they have when you have it, because they will help you find those breaches and understand what happened to mitigate it. They have security experts also on their staff that will do that, or they work with third-party organizations that will do the audits after security breach.
So that's very interesting, because normally you would think of insurance as something you use after you've had an incident, right? It's not really thought of as a preventative tool. But I guess in order to be compliant with your insurance, you have to take those preventative actions. So that's what's part of that. That becomes a big part of it. So the next two slides, we're going to talk. The next slide, we're going to talk a little bit more about cyber insurance, and then the last slide is how can organizations protect themselves. So why don't you hold on to that question? Don't answer it yet, Nuno. Let's go through the understanding cyber insurance and what it can do for you, right? So again, like you said, to mitigate the financial impact of a cybersecurity incident, and as well as the forensic investigation after the fact, any fees or fines associated with that. And so it really supports that compliance, as you mentioned, right? The insurance companies want you to follow best practices, and if you don't, then should you be breached, you don't get the payout, which you're hoping for.
Exactly.
So, all right. So that last question, what can you do to protect yourself?
So one of the things I always tell people with Office 365 is about not just don't assume the system's secure. Microsoft has a very secure environment, but they don't necessarily turn on all the features for you. The goal is for you to actually secure your environment and spend the time in doing a security system. Work with the vendor. We do something like a security assessment that will go through best practices, both Microsoft's best practices, third-party vendors, CIS benchmarks, best practices, and things like that. And we try to understand, look at your system, and also see where you currently are. And then if you need help implementing our recommendations, we could do that or for you, or you could go off and do it. But you should look at the best practices, make sure your environment's secure. It could be as simple as turning off that one feature that allows people to register third-party apps that caused the phishing issue that somebody had, right? You wouldn't think it's an issue because Microsoft allows for people to connect third-party applications, but somebody could build an app that's designed to hack it. So you want to have those controls that not everybody can approve those. You want your administrators to approve it so they can validate it's a legit system that's accessing data.
All right. Thank you for that. Shall we open up to questions now? Prem, do we have any questions in the chat, or does anybody have a question they want to ask live or in the chat?
We don't have any questions in the chat or in Q&A panel yet.
Okay.
So one question somebody always asks me is, how do I know if an email is suspicious when it comes to phishing emails? What I always tell them to do is don't just look at the name of the email, the person's name that comes up. Look at the actual email address, to see if it's familiar for you. There are 2 steps we could put in Office 365 to help identify that kind of stuff. But do those things in advance so that, as a regular step that you want to do, and it'll help you be suspicious. The other thing with it is if somebody's asking you to transfer money as a part of the phishing or buy stuff, don't just, do it. Don't send them an email back, because if it's going to a wrong person, actually call up the person. Use the old technology, call up the person, validate that was them, and see, is that something they want? just to make sure, right? Like if somebody, if you're the CFO and your CEO says transfer this amount of $100,000 to this account, right? You could do it, but it'll take you 2 minutes to just call them up and go, are you sure about this? It's not a normal request you usually have for me, right? So those little things will help you stay a little bit safer when it comes to phishing type emails.
Okay, so how does AI make use of phishing attacks? Like, how does that make it more dangerous?
Yeah, so AI is, what they're doing with the AI, with the phishing attacks, they're trying to, people are like using it to come up with phishing themes and stuff of how to attack you, types of emails to make it sound more professional, clean up the data, the emails, even act as different type of actors. Like, for example, they might, common one that I've seen lately is they're acting as HR, as an employee, saying that their bank account changed and they're sending it to HR to change their payroll information, so their pay goes into somebody else's account, right? So they start to use tools to come up with these scenarios to help sound more realistic.
Okay. Any other questions? Shall we go into our wrap up? So we've got our webinar survey with a giveaway for a $50 Amazon gift card. Now, how do I know that QR code is legit and not taking me to a phishing site?
You asking me?
I'm just asking in general.
Does anybody know?
I would scan it and find out.
Yeah. Well, they've done so. Yeah, I know in some of the cities around here, so one of the biggest people have made QR code stickers, and what they do is they put them on top of the parking meter stickers. So when people try to pay for parking, it goes to another website and they pay there instead.
Yeah. So what I would do is, and everybody's going to be checking the QR code. So always look at the URL it sends you to, right? Like if it doesn't look, it might be such a small spelling mistake and it's done on purpose because they couldn't get the same domain. So they might put an extra I in there, right? So that you could barely notice something, right? Something very small. And it's done, they're very strategic in what they do when they come up with these domains, when they're trying to do these things. And it's to make it look as close that you won't pick it up. But take the extra second, especially when you're giving out information, passwords, money, anything like that, credit cards information, just to validate that one extra piece of information to hopefully save you a little bit of headache later.
All right, are we good with that? I'm going to move on to the next slide. So thank you for coming out. We are CryoSpark. We're in Davis, California, and Toronto, Canada, and we service customers around the world, but mostly within North America. Glad you could join us. Glad we could be of any help. We've got some further resources. If you're interested, check out our events. If you have questions after the fact, feel free to send them to us. And I hope you sign up for one of our security clarity workshops. Thank you, Nuno.
Nice chatting with you, Colin.